Hi everyone. So today I'm going to be reviewing a book that's very close to my heart. It's a book that has created a lot of miracles in my life, and it's one that I have read and studied for the last 10 years. So this is a review a long time in the making. The book is called Invoking Lakshmi, and it's by Constantina Rhodes. And some of you might be familiar with her work. She's a professor of religion in New York, and she has several books where she transliterates and translates rather esoteric, difficult scriptures, such as Utpaladevas or Utpaladevta's Shiva Stotravali. And I had read that work quite consistently for a number of years, and I was consistently impressed by her scholarship. And also, in addition to being a very what's the right word here? She's a scholar who has certainly earned her merit in that area, but also her own personal experience informs what she writes, which I find to be very not only interesting, but also necessary to really understand the great scriptures. They're not dry in her analysis. They're actually rich with personal meaning, it's almost like having a conversation with her, which I find very to be one of the great fruits of the book. So I had heard through the grapevine that she had been writing a book on Lakshmi for many years, and it was, obviously I was growing up at the time, so I wasn't eagerly anticipating it, but I was excited to read it. So one day I was living in Vancouver, and I was doing like cycles and cycles of endless, stupid job interviews. And I had been on one, and I think I maybe had got that interview, meaning I had got the job. And I was kind of in a state where I didn't quite know if I should be celebrating, because I didn't really like that job, but it was good to have one. So I was so new to Vancouver, I was so new to the city, I didn't really have a place that was home. So I took the bus to a beautiful bookstore called Banyan Books. Anyone in Vancouver, if you are in Vancouver, visit Banyan Books. It's a great, not only is it a great bookshop, but it's almost like going to a temple. So I went there to kind of celebrate my quote-unquote victory. And in the bookshop was this copy of Invoking Lakshmi. And I bought it right on instinct, just picked it up and bought it. It was $35 at the time. And I just began to read it in the store. And I really credit that moment with developing a new relationship with the goddess. So for those of you who are new, and even for those of you who are not new, you might know that Lakshmi is considered to be the goddess of wealth. And as such, all of us use money, all of us need money, all of us have a relationship with it in one way or the other. And she's a very material goddess. She's very much of the earth. And as such, I think sometimes, I think certainly I had a very mundane impression of her. I had always felt that there was something more to her. And this book really helped unpack that. So the author goes into really the origins of the goddess Lakshmi in terms of not so much so mythological origins, but the cultural context in which she was formed, which I find very important. So, for example, one of the things that comes up very often in a lot of the earlier Vedic hymns is the association of Lakshmi and the cow. And to our modern day lifestyle, we don't really count wealth in cows, but to understand that the cow was such a necessary, vital, irreplaceable form of nourishment, of protection for people, was very important in understanding how they saw the goddess as ever giving, as really a deeply, deeply maternal, compassionate figure, and one in which they had a relationship with that had to be symbiotic. It wasn't as it is right now, where we just, if we have cows, we kind of exploit them for their leather, their milk, their meat, their what have you. So that was really critical, and then also I appreciated the way that she broke down the goddess as the kundalini within the human body, within the human story, actually. And deeper still, the true gifts she can give people. So, for example, the shift of seeing Lakshmi, or Mahalakshmi, as the goddess of wealth, who just provides material needs, which are important, material needs are amazing, but also that she really satisfies the objective every human being has, and every human being has a different objective. So Lakshmi comes from the Sanskrit word laksha, which means objective, aim, or goal. And everybody has a different story, everybody has a different thing that they're seeking. Lakshmi satisfies that need. And as such, prosperity, abundance, which is a word that kind of gets thrown around a lot, abundance, we all talk about an abundance mindset, that can look different for different people, and it's completely valid, however it satisfies that individual. Later on, as we get into the book, the subtitle of the book is called Invoking Lakshmi, the Goddess of Wealth in Song and Ceremony. The author has broken down really well, and I mean really well in terms of communicating her understanding, and also technically, as somebody that knows a little bit of, very little, I will say very little of Sanskrit and Hindi, I do appreciate how she has translated several of the hymns used to invoke Lakshmi. And to summarize a very broad swathe of history, Hinduism kind of has, and Hinduism is a very broad concept, but more on that later, kind of has three main schools of thought. We have the Vedas, the Puranas, and the Tantras. Each of which more or less are chronological from Vedas to Tantras, with Puranas in the middle, but each of them is different. Each of their objectives is different. Each of their rituals is different. But she has translated and transliterated several of these hymns, and I think she does make this assertion in the book, and I do think that it's accurate, that this is probably one of the few works in which you'll find so many. Some of these are appearing in English translation for the first time. And in reading them, both as a student and as a devotee and as a human being who is pursuing a relationship with the divine, I found them to be very, very educational, very rich with meaning, very inspirational. And I encourage anyone really to read this book. It's not so much so about understanding Hinduism, although it's a scholarly book. So if that is something that you are interested in, no doubt it'll satisfy that need. But also, I think if you're interested in religion, if you're interested in the goddess, if you're interested in how human beings have related to that over time, this is a great book. Personally, I have used many of those transliterations and translation in my personal practice. I think you can see my book is marked up. it's very difficult to find recordings, but when I do find them and I do chant along, I do really appreciate the amount of work that it must have taken to have created this book. Finding hymns, finding accurate hymns, translating them, transliterating them, it must have been a whole process. I mean, just this part alone, which contains all of these hymns, I really understood why it took her so long to write this book. So personally, I use this book, this personal part of the book, for my personal practice, but also I just think it's good literature to read. The second half of the book is actually really interesting for people who are in any way, shape, or form intrigued by Hindu rituals, what they mean, how they came about. She does a step-by-step breakdown of the Lakshmi Puja. And puja is the act of worship. It's probably most accurately described as ceremonial worship, which for anyone that's ever watched or participated in any Hindu ritual, it's very layered, and sometimes it can feel a little bit insular. And I found, I did not grow up so much with Hindu rituals, and so I have looked them up to really understand what they are and what they mean, and a lot of the literature available online is not really satisfying. There are thousands and thousands of rituals and thousands of answers, and all of the answers kind of seem as if they're trying to sell you something. They're trying to say, you should do this because it's good, and because it's good, you should do this. And there's something about that logic that doesn't really, it just doesn't feel authentic. Another buzzword, authentic. However, I really do appreciate Dr. Rhodes's breakdown of the puja steps and the puja mantras. Even just understanding that the puja takes place, as she writes, as a form of hospitality. It is based on the act of welcoming a guest. So, for example, in ancient India, and I think even in certain places in modern day India, when you invite a guest home, you will give them water to wash their hands. They can wash their feet. They're offered refreshment and all of that. The entire sequence is there. But even understanding something like kumkum, I think many of us have seen the red powder that people sometimes put a dot here with. To understand that kumkum, which used to be something very difficult to produce, made with sandal paste and a little bit of turmeric and thousands of hibiscus leaves, that it was a synthesis of several precious materials that signified auspiciousness. And it signified the hard work people would have to do to create goodness. And so in offering it, it is a humble act of giving the divine something from the human realm that is very precious. And I really found inspiration from that. And I'm not going to spoil the rest of it, but even understanding why, for example, in the pujas, you have a farewell ritual, which seems a little counterintuitive that you've spent so much time welcoming a deity, or in this case, a guest, but there's actually a ritual to bid farewell, and there's a reason why you do say farewell. It's a great text for anyone who is looking to just learn more. And I think it's not even learn more about Lakshmi Puja, just puja in general. To get more technical, for example, if you have read any scripture, you'll know that there's something known as the seer of the scripture, the meter of the scripture, the nail, the kilaka of the scripture. And I had kind of just taken all of those things for granted, like, oh, here's just a bunch of esoteric stuff that we can recite. But this book actually educates about what those things are, what they mean, and how they have changed over time. So I know for sure I was very thankful to receive that information. That being said, it's also an auspicious day today. The light's coming in. It's Deepavali or Diwali, which is a festival of Lakshmi. And I haven't been able to celebrate in the way that I normally do, but I have been celebrating by reading this book and making this video with you. I really encourage you to look it up, to read it. Also, any of Dr. Rhodes's work, I'll put a few links below. There are about 2 audio CDs, specifically one, I think it's called Activating Abundance. It was created with Inner Splendor Media, and it contains about 2 or 3 guided meditations by this author, as well as some of the scriptures recited by Brahmins, a certain number of times, like I think 11 times or 21 times. But the recordings are really good. They're really high quality in terms of the audio and also the pronunciation and research. I know I myself have revisited those meditations probably hundreds of times. I bought them in 2014 and I still refer to them. It's also a great way, I mean, if you can't buy the book, I mean, I've bought the book, bought those audio recordings and bought it on Kindle, so clearly I'm a fan. But I think any of those, and if reading is not your thing, I certainly recommend getting the audio. It's a great introduction. And with that, happy Diwali to those who are celebrating. And I do want to close this video by reading one of my favorite paragraphs from this book. I think it gives a really it gives a really good teaser for why you should get it. So the author writes, as we have seen in the songs in our collection, there are 2 basic types of prayers to the goddess of wealth. One is to ask for prosperity in any of its forms. The other is to ask for access to the source of that prosperity. For the first, the goddess comes to us, meets us in our place, on our terms, and works within our limitations. For the other, the goddess may meet us part way. But if we want access to the source, we need to be making that journey alongside her. Here, our roles become reversed. For the first type of prayer, we are the ones who do the invoking. For the other, it is the goddess who calls to us, inviting us to make a pilgrimage to experience her heavenly abodes, her exquisitely expansive state. In this book, we have focused on invoking Lakshmi, calling her into our realm. As marvelous as this has been, how much more exciting it is to anticipate the next great adventure. To be able to accept the challenge, should the goddess, on departing from our glorious meeting, suggest, next time, my place.